wonder, as I said earlier this afternoon, how the composer Alex Anderson would react to how many millions of people around the world have heard that song and go home with a little glee in their heart. Hey, listen, some people say glee in their heart when they get here and they love us, and then they go home. Some people that call Hawaii home have been leaving. And it is a disturbing trend that once again is coming to issue. And I've been dying. First of all, there's a bunch of stuff that we talked with Keli'i Akina about anyway, not just the OHA stuff, but stuff at Grassroots Institute. At Grassroots Institute, where he is the CEO and the president. And one of the things that they do is compile some really neat reports for us to take a look at and sort of give us another look at the reality of what we are here in Hawaii and what problems we have to address. And this one here says, Grassroots Institute of Hawaii has the second fastest population decline in the nation. Boy, that's a list that we don't want to be high on. What can we do to address that? Well, let's find out. Keli'i Akina joining us on our Newsmaker line. I hope your ears aren't burning because City Council Chair-elect Tommy Waters just said a whole bunch of nice things about you, Keli'i. Good afternoon. How are you? Happy Christmas.
Well, good afternoon, and mele kalikimaka to you, Mike, and to the audience that's listening. Great people always in the afternoon.
You know, we've always heard, that's just the price you pay for living in paradise. And there are some, like you, that don't like hearing those things. Let's talk about this. These are hard, cold numbers that you developed in it, and to me, it's kind of scary.
Well, you know, Mike, the price of paradise is just getting too expensive for a lot of people. You know, Hawaii is now number 3 in the nation in terms of residents leaving the state for greener pastures. We're just behind New York and Illinois that are right at the top. It's a sad thing that many people at all ends of the economic spectrum are having to leave our state. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, and you know, by the way, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of time, less fortunate economic people think badly of people that have a lot of money. And I often try to tell people, hey, look, everybody has the same problem. It's just that some of us are dealing with more zeros than others. In other words, you know, it's not just the down and out people that need help. It's the ones at the very top that can collapse in a minute because of the costs here.
We used to talk about the brain drain, and that used to refer to young people who would leave Hawaii for opportunities in college and to start their career and maybe get enough money to get a mortgage. But now it's happening to all sectors. We've got the young people who are leaving and not coming back. We've got middle-aged workers who are leaving and not coming back. And we've got the elderly, our kupuna, who can't survive here because it's so expensive. They're moving to Hawaii colonies all across the nation in places like Nevada and Florida. And so this is something that's affecting everybody. Mm-hmm. And if we keep losing our population, we're going to be losing our productive workforce.
We're going to be losing the people,
who build the economy.
Well, you know, and pay taxes and contribute. You know, it's interesting because Tommy Waters was just saying the same thing. He's one of 6 siblings. 5 of the 6 live on the mainland. He's the only one that still lives here.
Well, that's the same in my family. We've got 4 children, all grown, and they're all on the mainland earning their money to get a mortgage and maybe come back to Hawaii. But I would love it if they could find jobs with high salaries in Hawaii, stay here, and get their mortgage when they're young. Unfortunately, they don't think they can do that, and that story is told over and over again.
Well, one of the reasons I so enjoy the fruits of your labor when you put these nonpartisan factoids out there. I mean, this study that you've done doesn't care what color, shape, ethnicity anybody is. It's just the people. So obviously there would be then, all right, if we have noticed this, how do we turn things around? What are some of the things that we could do to maybe move a little bit higher on this list rather than be the 3rd worst in the country?
Well, for one thing, we can take a look at some states that are attracting people.
Yeah.
While people are leaving Hawaii and New York and Illinois, they're going to states like Idaho and Arizona and Nevada and Utah and Texas. And the one thing that is in common in all these states, you pay lower taxes. Mm-hmm. Whether you're rich or you're poor, you pay lower taxes. And that's a big thing. Another thing that's in common in all these states is that it costs less to run a business. You've got fewer regulations. You've got greater support from the government. And so you can live your life and you can run your business at a much lower cost elsewhere. And if we can do that in Hawaii, I think we can retain some people.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, you've often said, and I've heard you say it, I've heard many others say it too, that, the perceived, it's so expensive because it's shipping. It's shipping that makes it the most expensive place. Isn't the scarcity of well-run land the problem? I mean, if we had more income coming off our land, and there's a lot of land here, maybe we wouldn't have the high rate of taxes that we do.
Well, a survey done in 2019 found that 47% of all the local population is considering leaving Hawaii, and many of them have left already. And the main reason they gave was the cost of living. It was just too hard to earn enough money to afford living on the market here in Hawaii. And the number one item that they mentioned was housing. Mm-hmm. The housing cost either to rent or to own is exorbitant here in Hawaii. So I think that's number one, it's housing. And that's a sad thing because we don't actually have to have the housing crisis we have. Our research has shown that we have an artificial scarcity of land. We only build on 5% of all the land. 95% is set aside for watershed preserve and for agriculture. And even if you took a tiny percentage of that, 1 or 2 percentage points, you could increase the supply of land and have more housing. Yeah. But our laws are such that it's just too difficult. There's just a huge maze of land use and zoning laws that prevents that from happening.
Yeah, it's very discouraging because, and I've noticed this too. It doesn't look at it if you're looking at an aerial picture of Honolulu and Diamond Head and Waikiki, it looks like all the land is used up. But what it doesn't show you is what about the land? You go up to the top of the valley, and when you turn over and go to the other side, there's no buildings for miles. I mean, no, go ahead.
I want to make one thing clear, however. We're not proposing to fill all of the interior of our islands with housing. Yeah. But research has shown you just take a small percentage and you could have a lot more housing. You can develop upward in some regions. You can develop outward in some regions. But our laws are just too complicated. We're overly regulated in terms of housing laws, land use laws, and other laws that affect businesses, such as regulations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Our guest is Keli'i Akina. Today's hat that he's wearing is the president and CEO of Grassroot Institute, and this recent study that they've done that we're going to continue to discuss it's alarming. It's the number of people that are either leaving or have left or contemplating leaving here for what, greener pastures? No, less green out of their wallets. That's what it is. It's 5:15. Here's Malin Moore with traffic. Okay, so is the thing. Another Mele Kalikimaka indeed. Okay, here's something that we have to talk about. And this, every time you turn around, there's somebody says, oh, but here's the plan. Here's the answer. Today we see the commission, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands Commission talking about, we've approved this casino. That doesn't mean there's going to be a casino, but it means that they wouldn't mind there being a casino. And I can tell you that there's been any number of times where, Keli'i Akina, I know you've seen this before. Isn't it funny how some people immediately sort of gravitate toward that and say, well, if we'd have had a lottery, if we'd had gambling, we wouldn't have this problem. What's your thoughts? I know that in the past, I've heard you say things like me, that we have survived so far without gambling. Why do we need to bring it in now? Do you think, is this going to get looked at under the microscope a little bit more this time, do you think?
Well, definitely we have to take a harder look at the pros and cons of any gambling proposal. But I would like to speak a little more generally. It's very easy during a time of crisis to reach for a quick fix.
Yep.
To say that we've been hit hard economically because of the COVID lockdowns. Our economy is devastated and we need to have money. And it's very easy to reach for a solution that really is a quick fix. But the reality is the problem existed long before the COVID crisis, and that the Hawaiian homelands should have been using its land to develop commercial revenues over the last several decades. So the basic business model should be shifted. And so that's why I'm a little bit concerned of any reach for a quick fix, whether it's gambling or something else. The same thing is true of the way people are looking at the population. Some people look at the data that we've released and the analysis and say, our state is losing its population because of the COVID crisis. Well, that's not the case, because the data we're looking at shows a trend over the last 4 years, a consistent trend of every year, Hawaii losing its population. The UH Economic Research Organization tells us that by 2022, we're going to lose another 20,000 residents.
My goodness.
And that has nothing to do with the COVID crisis, although it will get worse with the COVID crisis. That has to do with the way we tax our people. That has to do with the way we regulate our businesses. That has to do with the lack of economic vitality that we have in our state. And those are the long-term problems that have to be addressed. And the same thing is true in terms of providing for Native Hawaiians. It's not going to be a quick fix of any kind whatsoever. Yeah. It's got to be dealing with the fundamental economic conditions in our state, and that's where we need good political leadership.
Yeah, and I agree, and I was pleased to see some prominent members of the Hawaiian community coming out in the last day talking about, wait, nobody talked to us about gambling. It sounds pretty good, but it isn't, and so we need to be told a lot more before any particular group is going to put their stamp on. I would imagine that would be true too to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, looking at this with a microscope before coming out with a position one way or the other. Do you think?
Well, the gambling proposal is coming from the Department of Hawaiian Homeland,
right,
which is a different agency from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Many of your listeners know that I was reelected as trustee at large of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And although I'm here not in that capacity,
yes,
speaking officially, I'm here speaking on behalf of Grassroots Institute. I can say this as a Hawaiian. It really troubles me that so many Native Hawaiians have to move away from their homeland here in Hawaii. It's great for those who want to go to the mainland and across the world, but not all of them want to go. Currently, there are about 500,000 Native Hawaiians in the United States. More than half of them live outside of Hawaii.
That's shocking.
Which may be great for it may be great for some who want opportunity, but the problem is not the fact that we don't have gambling in Hawaii. The problem is that just to live here, in terms of getting housing or getting high-paying jobs or having businesses that can succeed, we're really low in terms of national standards there. And that causes Native Hawaiians, as well as all other residents, to start moving away in record numbers.
Yeah, and that's kind of shocking, you know. I mean, I had the story the other day, and I'm sure you've heard it before, Keli'i, and that was that, you know, we have such a good police academy here that we get our young, folks get recruited, and they go to a place like Washington State or Oregon or somewhere else, and they find out not only is they have a pretty good salary, but they're going to be able to buy a home on a rookie cop's pay. And once they do that, they say, well, I'll work here for a while, then I'll go home. It turns out that becomes their home, and they just don't come back here. And that's got to be very alarming to families that are losing the younger, the brighter. And the only way we can get them back is have a level playing field somehow.
Right. We're losing people at both ends of the economic spectrum.
Good point. Yeah.
Those who can afford to live here and those who can't. For example, our tax system is both the most progressive and the most regressive. In terms of being progressive, we tax the top portion of our population more than anywhere else. The top 1% of the tax-paying households in Hawaii, they pay nearly 25% of all income tax. So when people say we need to tax the rich more, that's simply not the case. The rich are already paying huge taxes, and they're leaving as a result of that. But at the same time, we're taxing the poor. Our general excise tax really hits people at the lower economic stratum.
Absolutely.
And we're taxing their food, we're taxing their medical. Most states have given up doing that, but we continue to do that because our legislators want to use that GE tax to fund all kinds of things, from the rail to new projects. And that's really damaging the lower end of our economic population.
Yeah, and for tonight's discussion, let's finish off with this one. I know this is a big deal. We're very, very concerned, and I heard you say this also, that, you know, we have really, really got to be careful because our economy cannot afford to go back to the first tier. In matter of fact, we don't belong in the second tier. We belong in that third tier pretty soon. And I know that you're hearing from a lot of folks and a lot of people that, you know, that support you at Grassroots Institute, is that the restrictions put in on our private and locally owned small businesses are horrific, and they may have permanent implications. We might lose a lot of these people.
Oh, absolutely. It's becoming harder and harder to do business in Hawaii with the COVID lockdowns. And I'm not suggesting at all that we throw caution to the wind. I don't think anyone is suggesting that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have to do is recognize that businesses that want to succeed are also businesses that will invest themselves in good health practices, making sure that they monitor their premises, making sure that people are wearing masks, that people are using sanitizer and keeping their social distance. And if we can rely upon businesses to do this, they're going to succeed. They have every incentive to want to do so. And if we can let them do that, that's the way out of this. We've got to balance both needs, the health care need, most definitely, as well as the need to let our economy grow. And let's keep this in mind, too. When our economy goes downhill and people lose jobs with our massive unemployment, that also affects health. It affects mental health. It affects physical health. It's something that can be very devastating to individuals, and that's not good for public health at all either.
Okay,
we need a robust economy.
Yeah, you bet. And this one last one for you, Keli'i, today, and that is a couple of things. First of all, the governor made the announcement a little earlier this afternoon that we had broke first, and that was that the furlough situation was going to be tabled for the time being, at least. We're not sure when, whether it's June or July or whatnot. But we can't keep relying on bucketfuls of money coming off the printing press at the federal government, can we? I mean, just because, you know, we've got a little bit of breathing room. It also looks like $250 million of that stimulus might be going to keep the rail going. I mean, are we, once again, aren't we just deferring the bad news?
You know, the idea that we can borrow our way or rely upon free gifts from the federal government to get ourselves out of the hole is only going to defer the pain because we have to pay for it. The fundamental rule of economics is that there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Yeah. So a handout might look good one day, but 6 months, 6 years later, it's going to pile on to the huge debt load that we have, which we're crushing our people with. And that's the main thing. We've got to stop spending as much as we're spending in our state. We've got to tighten our belts. We've got to be more efficient and more effective. And we've got to get out of the way of business and allow business to succeed here so that revenues can be generated. That's the solution.
Yeah, and I think the more of our small businessmen and women that grasp that fact and reach out and get some help in areas that maybe in HR help or in some other help where they don't have expertise so they can concentrate on what they know is pretty important. Number one concern for Grassroots Institute going into 2021 is what?
Making Hawaii more livable for its population. And we can learn more about that if you go to our website, grassrootinstitute.org, grassrootinstitute.org. We've got a report called Roadmap to Prosperity, which has 23 solutions on how to get ourselves out of this post-pandemic era.
Let me ask you, Keli'i, if we can get that. Can we do a session one day next week about those 20 points? I think that I took a look at it and it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Tommy Waters also made mention of it that he saw that story. I think that's. I love lists, and isn't it a good idea for people to relate? Hey, if we did this, we can get that, and ease the burden a little bit.
It's a date, Mike. I'll be back next week.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Keli'i. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Aloha to you. Mele Keli'i Maka.
Aloha. There you go. Keli'i Akina. We had him put on both hats. Not only the OHA hat, which is that large trustee, but that of Grassroot, ROOT, not S, grassrootinstitute.org. Check it out. It's 5:30. More of the Mike Buck Show coming up right after this.